They are not the games that everyone's talking about that will shape the national championship race in 2020. They are not necessarily the games that you can't wait to see, but they are the games that will most likely turn out to be fun, entertaining, and could play an impact into the 2020 season. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down the under-the-radar non-conference games for 2020. Please check out the video in which we posted several weeks ago outlining our top 10 non-conference games and all the games you would expect to see: Texas, LSU, Ohio State, Oregon, and the like. But these are the under-the-radar games, so let's get started right here. Like, comment, share the videos on social media, and subscribe. Hit the bell for the notifications, and you know when we're going live. At number 10, we've got a rematch from 2019 in Corvallis. Oklahoma State hosting Oregon State. Of course, Jonathan Smith doing an outstanding job with the Beavers, going 5-7 in his inaugural season, coming back as a star quarterback, of course, and offensive coordinator at Oregon State to take over the helm there with the Beavers. Jamar Jefferson, running back, one of the best in the Pac-12 that nobody knows about. 7 of 8 top tacklers coming back for Oregon State to take on Spencer Sanders. Chuba Hubbard, one of the best in the business, 221 yards and 3 touchdowns in this matchup last year. Tylan Wallace at wide receiver. The Cowboys won in 52-36 on the road last year. Oregon State will try to repay the favor on September 3rd at Oklahoma State. Number 9 game under the radar, TCU at Cal. Who could forget the 2018 Cheez-It Bowl that went to overtime, tied at 7. You got the top tackler in the Big 12, Garrett Wallow, 126 stops coming back for TCU, along with Trayvon Mooring and his 4 interceptions, 2 of the top defensive players in the Big 12, and the number 1 defense in the conference for TCU, but they've lost quite a bit. Max Dugan at quarterback will have to improve, coming off 15 touchdowns and 10 picks for 5-7 TCU. For Justin Wilcox, one of the best young coaches in college football, he's got quarterback Chase Garber's back, a bowl victory under his belt. Cal went 8-5 last season. It's a rematch again of the Cheez-It Bowl, a classic. TCU and Cal along the West Coast on September 5th. Game number 8 pits West Virginia, Florida State, neutral site game in Atlanta, September 5th. From Will Grier and that prolific West Virginia offense that put up 60-plus points against Oklahoma in almost winning the Big 12 championship and getting to the title game, all the way down to the worst offense in the Big 12 in 2019. Florida State's defense should be stellar with 10 of 11 starters back. We've got a couple of coaches who have something to prove. Neil Brown coming off a 5-win campaign in his first season in Morgantown, taking on, of course, Mike Norvell at Florida State. Seminoles and Mountaineers, September 5th. Game number 7, under the radar, non-conference, and keep in mind that we're bypassing the traditional ACC-SEC matchups. Georgia, Georgia Tech, Florida, Florida State, Louisville, Kentucky, which should be a good one. And also, of course, South Carolina, Clemson, and also that Iowa State game, which should again be entertaining this year for games that we don't normally see in our top 10 under the radar. Number 7's Temple, going to Miami on the 5th of September as well. So this is not necessarily a give-me for the Power 5 over the Group of 5. The Owls coming off a 55-13 drubbing in its bowl game against North Carolina. North Carolina going up against the ACC once again. Miami, of course, lost to FIU last year. Barely beat Western Michigan 17-12. De'Aaron King at quarterback, making his debut for the Canes, coming off a 50-touchdown campaign for Houston in 2018. Rod Carey in his second year as head coach at Temple. Of course, coming off the 2 successful runs for Matt Rule and Jeff Collins in building the program. Quarterback Anthony Russo, 21 touchdowns, 12 picks for the Owls, 29th defense in the nation for Temple, trying to pull off an upset at Miami September 5th, our game number 7. Our under-the-radar game number 6 pits Appalachian State and Wake Forest. Of course, Appalachian State has pulled off its upsets as of late, most notably in 2019 against North Carolina and South Carolina. Head coach Sean Clark, the newest in line of Appalachian State head coaches who then move on to the next level, of course. For Wake Forest at 7-6, Dave Clawson doing an outstanding job of keeping them competitive in the ACC. No Jamie Newman as he moves on to Georgia. The quarterback will most likely be Sam Hartman, former starter who lost his job to Newman. He's back after throwing 16 touchdowns in 2018 and authored a win against Florida State in 2019. It's App State, Wake Forest in Winston-Salem on September 11th on a Friday night. Game number 5 under the radar, Cincinnati at Nebraska, September 26th. Luke Fickell, 2 outstanding seasons in the Queen City, 11-2 and 10-3 the past 2 years. Nebraska's Scott Frost has not accomplished anything at Nebraska thus far. It's year number 3 now after 4-8 and 5-7. Adrian Martinez, a disappointing campaign with 10 touchdowns and 9 picks in 10 games played after 25 total touchdowns in 2018. He will have 2 impressive weapons in Wan'Dale Robinson and J.D. Spielman. Desmond Ridder back at quarterback for the Bearcats. Cincinnati at Nebraska on September 26th. Game number 4 of our under-the-radar selections for 2020 is Arizona State hosting BYU on September 18th. The Cougars are making their typical Pac-12 schedule run through September. They have played 13 games against the Pac-12 in the past 5 years, not faring too well at 3-10, although BYU did pull off an upset win against USC last season at home. Jaden Daniels, as a freshman, went to Michigan State, pulled off an upset as a 2-score underdog, had a number of upsets and comeback wins under his belt despite a porous offensive line for Arizona State in 2019 that should be much, much better this time around. Zach Wilson, big year for the Cougars 2 years ago, coming off a bit of a disappointing sophomore campaign, 11 touchdowns and 9 picks. BYU at Arizona State, our game number 4. Our third-ranked under-the-radar game in West Lafayette, Purdue hosting Memphis. Of course, the Tigers were the class of the group of 5 this past season. They earned the New Year's 6 bowl bid, taking on Penn State, losing that game in an entertaining one, 55-39 at the Cotton Bowl. And Brady White's back at quarterback for the Tigers, 4,000-plus yards, 33 touchdowns. Head coach Ryan Silverfield taking over for Mike Norvell, has been on the staff there at Memphis since 2016, taking on a Purdue team that was disappointing last year after Jeff Brom got off to a great start in 2 seasons, 2017 and 18, taking the Boilers to bowl games and then falling off to just 4 wins. Jack Plummer is the projected starting quarterback. And, of course, Purdue looking for a big season from Rondell Moore, 113 receptions, explosive dynamic in 2018, but falling off after just 4 games played due to injuries and 29 receptions in 2019. It's Purdue playing one of the most difficult non-conference schedules this upcoming season. Purdue hosting Memphis on September 12th. Our game number 2 under the radar hits Ole Miss and Baylor on September 5th. Lane Kiffin taking on Dave Aranda, 2 new head coaches there. Charlie Brewer and 3 of the top 5 Baylor receivers are back, although the Bears lose, of course, head coach Matt Rule, who took them from 1 win to 7 to 11, and they lose 9 of their top 11 tacklers on defense. Matt Corral battling John Reese Plumlee for the starting quarterback spot at Ole Miss. We'll see who wins out, the runner or the quarterback. The passer, Jerrion Ely, one of the best in the SEC at running the football at almost 7 yards per carry. Ole Miss and Baylor should put up points on September 5th. Neutral site game in Houston. And our under-the-radar game, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, number 1 selection, BYU at Minnesota. P.J. Fleck hit the Golden Gophers, of course, defeating Auburn at the Outback Bowl to finish in the top 10 at 11-2. Another classic P.J. Fleck rebuilding job, as he did at Western Michigan, going from 1 win to 13-1. Minnesota, though, has a recent history of struggling against FCS teams and Group of 5 competition. Where do we place BYU? They're somewhere, of course, between the Power 5 and the Group of 5, but Minnesota has struggled in these types of games, narrowly winning 3 such affairs in non-conference play this past season. Tanner Morgan back at quarterback for Minnesota, and the Morgan to Rashad Bateman connection is one of the best in college football. BYU pulled off the upset, as we mentioned, against USC this past season, but they went on the road 2 years ago against a top 5 Wisconsin team, and the Cougars won it on a late field goal miss by the Badgers. BYU at Minnesota, our number 1 selection for under the radar, exciting and possibly impactful games for the 2020 season. Please leave us your selections down below right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, and lock it in here for college football coverage each and every day.